My better half in life and I started a company called Noble Hospitality.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and my guest today is one of the most decorated chefs in Omaha history. He's a 5-time James Beard Award semifinalist. He's competed on the Food Network, and his work has been featured in the New York Times, Food and Wine Magazine, and Bon Appetit, as well as many others. I'm so excited to catch up with him and just kind of talk about what's going on in his life now. Clayton Chapman, this is long overdue. I can't believe I've been doing this show for 5.5 years, and this is the first time you're on. Clayton, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, listeners or viewers, if this gentleman's name sounds familiar, it's for a very good reason. Clayton ran the Grey Plume, which was one of Omaha's most beloved fine dining restaurants for about a decade until it closed in 2020. And I know a lot of people, because I've had these conversations, they're just like, man, have you heard, what's Clayton up to now? What's he doing? So I want to hear it right from the source. Clayton Chapman, what are you up to?
Yeah, I think, COVID really kind of gave me the opportunity to pause and reflect. The Grey Plume had an incredible 10-year run, and I felt incredibly lucky and blessed to have had it. But, when COVID happened, it kind of gave us the opportunity to pause and reflect and say, what's really important. I have 2 older children, and I had recently just had a new son in January of 2020. And so it was just this opportunity to be a family and pause and reflect. And ultimately, when the kind of ban lifted and everyone started to reopen, I really just kind of had to ask myself, do I want the next 10 years to look like the last 10 years, or do I want to kind of do something different? And so ultimately we decided to close on a really high note and focus on other things.
What was it that made you choose path B and go in a different direction?
I think, I had just kind of taken several months, and I was really present with my family. I was home on nights and weekends and family dinners, and I had really kind of missed that component of life for a number of years. And I guess that was just maybe more important.
So what are you up to now?
Yes. So flash forward, beginning of 2021, my better half in life and I started a company called Noble Hospitality. And Noble Hospitality does a number of things. We do some restaurant consulting, like turnkey solutions for new startups, whether, it's, fine dining, fast casual, or anything in between. And then I do bespoke private events and catering, in-home and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely follow Clayton on social media because you want to be aware of when he does pop-ups. I actually got to meet you for the first time this is probably a month ago now. It doesn't matter. No one listening to this cares. You did a dinner at the Bohemian Gardens, and it was just absolutely fantastic. That was my first time having your food, and I already have this great regret that right as I was coming into my foodie phase is when the Grey Plume phased out, and I feel like those are two ships in the night, and I've always wanted to have a meal of yours, and it was well worth the wait. So follow him on social media, because if he does another pop-up dinner, I'm sure you will, but do more in the future. That's a hot ticket. I want to ask you about the consulting side of things.
Sure.
What does it look like to consult with a restaurant? How involved are you with design, recipe development? Just kind of, what does restaurant consulting look like?
Sure. Well, I think it really kind of depends on the client and, what they're looking for and what their background is. Some have a background in design and architecture and, just general flow of the business, or they have a really strong business acumen, so they don't really need consulting in that, but it's more in, menu development, staff training, operations, and things of that nature. So it's really kind of a smorgasbord of things, and it really depends on what the client's looking for.
So I was trying to, as I was preparing for this, I was trying to put myself in the mindset of what it would be like to be a consultant. And I think that there's I was trying to balance what this would be like in my head. Because one, you don't have the ultimate pressure of, hey, when this thing opens and if it fails, then it's all on me because, it's your concept. But on the other hand, you're like designing something or helping design something, and you're coming up with ideas and being creative, and then ultimately you have to hand that off to someone else.
For
and
sure.
You don't get to like own that and continue to develop it and see it grow. So what's that yin and yang for you like a consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a little bit less pressure, right? Because you're not the one, on the banknote at the end of the day. But at the same time, it almost adds like more pressure because I know what that does feel like. And
you don't want to let them down.
I don't want to let them down, right? So I've been in that position. I know what that stress level's like. And so, yes, there's not as much pressure, but there's almost more pressure because you want to see them succeed. And fortunately, they get to learn from, a number of years of my mistakes.
What are some of those mistakes that you made that you feel like you learned from and make you a better consultant now?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's really just about life experience, right? It's about knowing the flow of how something's going to work. Like you might conceptually have like a great, menu idea, but not necessarily know how it's going to like work in the kitchen or how it's going to come off the line, how you're going to maybe do ingredient sourcing. So it's really just kind of that dichotomy of making sure that there's a flow in operations.
You mentioned something that was really important to you, and one of the reasons that you kind of went on the path of not reopening the Grey Plume was how much you enjoyed spending time with your family.
Yeah.
And now you're co-running Noble Hospitality with Heather Smith, who is your partner. What is that like?
It's great. Yeah, we're fortunate that we get along really well, so together in life and in business. And I understand that that's not necessarily for everyone. That you spend a lot of time together, but we love it.
How do you separate personal and business life, or do you do that? I've talked to husband and wife teams who say, yeah, we don't talk about business outside of work, and we keep that in a bucket. And I've had others like family-run restaurants. They're just like, oh yeah, we talk about the restaurant all the time. It's our life. This is what we do. How do you guys handle that side of things?
Yeah, I think it definitely bleeds into personal time and things, but I wouldn't say that it's like overwhelming or daunting or feels like it like takes over per se. Heather also has a company called Intuitive Mama, where essentially it's like life coaching for women, and she does like subconscious reprogramming of the mind and like all the things. So her time is really kind of divided, and she spends a lot of time on that, and I spend a lot of time on Noble.
Fair enough. Okay, I thought it would be kind of fun to walk through your career and kind of start from the beginning and figure out how Clayton Chapman came to be. The first information I could find about you was a quote that you gave in another publication. You said, "I've been in the restaurant industry since I was 13. I've known since I started that I was never getting out of it."
Wow.
What did you mean by that? And what was it about the work that grabbed you right away?
Absolutely. So at 13, yes, I was a sandwich artist. My first job was at Subway.
There you go.
There used to be a Subway on 76th and Pacific, which is no longer there, but I used to walk there on the weekends. That was my first job. From there, my parents ended up moving us like a little outside the city between Omaha and Fort Calhoun. They had a small acreage out there off Highway 75. And there was a restaurant called Mother's Good Food in North Omaha.
Okay.
Now it's Finicky Frank's, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But Mother's Good Food was like a New Orleans Creole-style restaurant. It was run by two retired Marines. Red Dog and Mike were their names. And I actually started with them as a dishwasher. And then I literally did everything from like clean the restaurant until they were comfortable enough with me like starting prep. And then from prep, it went to like working the line, and I just kind of fell in love with the song and dance of like service. There's like a lot of pressure, in service, and there's also the adrenaline rush that comes with it. And, I grew up loving food. We always had a large garden at home, and, we'd can things in the summer. So that was just like, I guess, the natural progression and life cycle for me. I worked in a couple of restaurants in Omaha before I graduated high school. And then I was off to Chicago.
You mentioned the pressure of service. that, like, I feel like that either makes or breaks someone. Like, and I've worked the line just in a couple of restaurants. Just, they say, hey, come out and just work, and I'm like, yes, I want to experience this, but I've never worked in a restaurant full time. And even on those nights when I'm just given menial tasks or like tiny things, I get so stressed, and I'm just like, oh, we got to get this out. We got to get this out. Oh shoot, we're in the weeds.
Sure.
And like I don't think I would function very well in that environment. And a lot of the population, I think, is similar to me, that where they would wilt in that environment instead of rise to the occasion. What do you think it is about your personality that when that adrenaline gets pumping, when the line gets crazy, you don't fade away, but you like get excited?
Yeah. I don't know if it's like nervous system regulation or if it's just like being able to be calm under pressure, but I guess I just always have been able to be. As like a young person, it's like the pressure of service and, the never-ending tickets and, meeting the expectation of the chef as the food comes up. And then as, I evolved or time evolved and I started my own place, then it's like the pressure of the tickets, but it's pressure of, your team being able to keep up. It's the pressure of the people waiting at the door for their seats. And, maybe someone didn't show up that day, or maybe someone showed up and drank before they came in, and then you sent them home. It's like never ending. And I think that, for a long time, I absolutely rose to the occasion, and it just felt like the normal cycle of what the business brings. And now that I'm like kind of one step removed from it, so to speak, and you're able to like kind of reflect back on it. We talk about like stories sometimes and we're like, oh my gosh, how did we get through that? That's wild. But you just do it in the moment.
So at age 16, you got a chance to compete at a national competition at the Illinois Institute of Art in Chicago against 50 of the top teen cooks in the country. Now, I know that experience didn't exactly go the way that you wanted it to.
Yes.
But what happened, and what did you learn from that made you want to pursue a culinary career?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so funny, right? Like you don't know what you don't know. And like I was working in restaurant kitchens at the time. I think I was working at M's Pub in the Old Market, which is a really high volume restaurant. So here I thought, I kind of knew what I was doing and, felt good about it. When I got to Chicago, I showed up with my mother, and I think I had my chef knife rolled in like a kitchen towel. And these other students like showed up, with a perfectly pressed chef coat. They had their chef mentor, their chef coach with them. I just walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, I am not prepared. So long story short, I think the nerves got the better of me in that particular circumstance, and I like absolutely bombed it. It was a 3-course meal. You had to do shrimp cocktail, chicken chasseur, which is like a chicken, and then you essentially like make a brown sauce and rice pilaf and broccoli. And honestly, I forget what the dessert was, but I burnt my broccoli, overcooked my chicken. It was kind of a disaster. But yes, what did I learn? So I ended up staying afterwards and talked to a few of the chefs of like, hey, what did I do wrong? How could I do it better? One of the chefs was by the name of Chef Michael Howe, who later became my business partner in the Grey Plume. But he kind of gave me like a number of details of things that I could work on and autocorrect. And then so my mom was like, hey, Chef Howe, as a consolation prize, we want to go out to a fancy meal. Can you recommend somewhere in town for us to go eat? He said, yep, if you want like a true fine dining experience, go to a place called True. It was under the direction of Rick Tremonto and Gail Gand. I had the opportunity to meet Chef Gand here in Omaha that summer previously at like a food expo. And so then, just like naturally aligned, we happened to get a reservation that night. We did a 6-course tasting menu. We got a tour of the kitchen afterwards. And that was it for me. It was like that meal and it was that tour where it was all of these tiny little copper pots lined the entire kitchen. The kitchen was so clean you could have like eaten off the floor. It was silent, like there was no one talking other than, order in, yes, chef, whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my jam. I'm in.
You still remember that night?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was 23 years ago.
But that's like, that speaks to the power of food, man. And, well, not just food. I mean, I'm sure you remember the dishes, but also you remember how the kitchen was run. You remember the design. Like, when we have, as humans, when we have amazing meals, it is just so directly connected to memories. I mean, I have meals like that as well that just stick out. But none of my really memorable meals led to a future job because you worked at True.
I did.
While you were in college. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're talking about this fantastic restaurant run by Rick Tremonto, who's a celebrity chef. You're learning under just fantastic talent. You were the youngest chef de partie in that restaurant's history, all while you're in school.
Yeah.
Like, when I was in college, I could barely go to class and like play intramural basketball at the same time. How did you handle all that?
I guess I was really driven. And it was like, go, go, go. Actually, so, funny story. When I applied to True, I was young. I was 18. And by the time I finally got the job, I was the youngest guy in the kitchen by, a good handful of years for sure. But I'd send in my resume. I wouldn't get a response. Obviously not. That's to be expected. Then I'd call the chef de cuisine at the time. His name was Joel Dennis. And, he had worked for under Elaine Ducasse. And just incredibly talented chef. I asked for Chef Joel. I'm like, Chef Joel's busy. Naturally fielding calls for him. But I think I applied over 6 times over the course of 4 weeks until they finally let me stage, which means you go in and work for free for the day. And at the end of my stage, I didn't totally botch it. So they allowed me to come back. And I just kept coming back until one day someone didn't show up. And I just slid right into their spot.
What do you remember about that first stage?
Being so nervous, for sure. I think they had me peel potatoes and pearl onions and carrots and things all day long.
But you didn't bomb it.
I didn't bomb it. No. And then the first station I worked there was entremetier. It was like the fish vegetable station. Yeah.
So, we're talking Rick Tremonto. I know he's not on the line every night, but it was his restaurant. This is he's a James Beard Award winner. He's been on Top Chef. He's been on Top Chef Masters. Chef Joel, also very, well accomplished, very well known. And just the restaurant, True overall, it's during its heyday, it was one of the restaurants in Chicago. Like, every night when someone comes in there, they're expecting to have the experience like you had 23 years ago, maybe not that they'll remember it that much, but when they come into that restaurant, they're expecting excellence every single time.
For sure.
It's not like, you can go to your neighborhood bar or whatever, and if something's burned, it's just like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll be back next week. This is still my place. True is like, if you're going there, you're going to have a life-changing meal. What kind of pressure is that as a cook? Man,
that's an excellent question. I think it's, it's more like just like a commitment to the craft, right? Like, you have to care about the meal almost more than the guest does, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like this, this passion for the craft, and it's just like a wood craftsman or a metal worker or something like that. It's like in the sense of you just have to take incredible pride in your work, hold yourself to high standards, hold those around you to high standards, in the sense of iron sharpens iron. It's chef wouldn't have to always hold us responsible for things because we would hold each other responsible. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned one of the things that really drew you to that job was just the silence on the line, mm-hmm. and just the calmness with which everyone executed. And that is something, when you said that, immediately I thought of the Boiler Room,
sure.
which is a restaurant here in Omaha, open kitchen, you can see everything. And what amazes me about visiting there is it's just there's no yelling. You can barely even hear them talk, even though they're just feet away, because it's just, there's no wasted motions. It's just sure. They're all moving on a string together. And I think, a lot of people have this perception, and I know that this is changing, but that kitchens are crazy. They're loud. There's people screaming. We watch a show like The Bear, and the chef is flying off the handle, and people are, coming in drunk or high or whatever it might be.
Right.
So how do you create an atmosphere like the one that you had at True, like the one at the Boiler Room, where it's not loud, there's no chaos, but it's just everybody is just moving in sync together.
For sure. Yeah. Chef Tim is awesome, by the way, at the Boiler Room. So
yes,
talented.
Tim Nicholson, the absolute man.
Absolutely, I agree too. I would say it really kind of starts at the top, right? Like you have to have that, like what we always used to call was calm, gentle pressure, where it's just you're always moving, you're always calm, you're always going. Like I've always been of the mindset that if like you have to yell, you're probably like not doing your job effectively. As a good leader or as a good chef, I think Tim, at least in my opinion of him, is that he's probably very similar to that, just like super calm and level-headed. And, that's a trickle-down effect, and that permeates into, the kitchen culture.
So I'm interested in your next career step because you're in Chicago. You're in one of America's great food cities, working at True, an incredible restaurant. And your next steps were to come back to Omaha, work at, well, maybe, I don't know if next steps, but you ended up back in Omaha. You worked at V. Mertz, you worked at Spencer's for steaks and chops, and then eventually opened the Grey Plume. I'm curious about that path that you took, because today you can open a fantastic restaurant, it seems like just about anywhere, and get great recognition for it. I think a really good example, Gavin Kaysen and his restaurant that he's got in Minneapolis, I think was one of the trendsetters, where it was like, that was a dude who was working in New York City, and he went home and opened a great restaurant in Minnesota. And some people were just like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? But that's possible now. And now we see Yoshitomo, a sushi restaurant in the middle of Nebraska, getting nominated for James Beard Awards. So today I think you can open a restaurant just about anywhere and hit it big. But back when your career was starting, it was kind of like you got to go to the big cities and make the name for yourself. What was it that made you were in the big city, what was it that made you take that step back and say, I'm going to go to Omaha?
Yeah, so when I left Chicago, I bought a one-way ticket to go see my older brother in Togo, West Africa. He was in the Peace Corps there. So I spent some time with him, and then I bought another one-way ticket to Europe and landed in London, went up through northern England, went over to France, all down southern France, like just backpacked as like a young man, and I had an incredible trip.
How long was that trip?
A couple months.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I ended up catching pneumonia, came back to the States, and Omaha was really sort of supposed to just kind of be a landing pad, like a rest and rejuvenate. And I was going to head out to Northern California, where what we were doing, or what we eventually started doing at the Grey Plume, was like already really prevalent, right? Like farm to table, sustainable sourcing, knowing where your food comes from. Like that was a way of life out there. So essentially I applied just as a line cook at V. Mertz, and I just kind of, wanted to save up a little money before I moved and all the things, and they offered me a chef de cuisine position. I was like, oh my gosh, I was 21 years old, and they wanted to make some changes to the restaurant. They wanted to like really kind of up their menu offerings and, not even like expand. They wanted to introduce a tasting menu, because at least to my knowledge at the time, there like wasn't a tasting menu in Omaha at that point. So I like had to make a choice, right? Do I want to like go out and be part of a system that's like already created, or do I kind of want to be like this catalyst of change and do it in Omaha? I love Omaha. I love the Midwest, country boy at heart, and so I decided to stay. That was like the first part of it.
The first part?
Well, the first part of staying.
Okay.
So it was like an incredible opportunity, what I was doing at V. Mertz. And like you said, I had left there and went to Spencer's. At the time, I'm trying to think of how old my oldest son was. He was very young. I think he was maybe a year and a half old maybe, when I opened the Grey Plume. But essentially, it was like that combination of, loving the culture of the Midwest and the people and the lifestyle. It's a wonderful place to raise kids, and that was kind of the beginning of the next phases.
How did you know the time was right to open your restaurant?
Oh, how do you ever know if the time is right? Somebody asked me that once before, and the only way I knew how to answer it was that if I would have opened the Grey Plume 10 years ago or 10 years from now, I probably would open, like at least in that caliber or that style of restaurant, the same restaurant, right? If you're going to do fine dining, I still would do all of the same type of sourcing and the same type of serviceware, working with local artisans. And so I don't know if the timing was right or wrong, but it would have been the same then as it would be now.
How long had the concept for the Grey Plume been in your mind before you put it into action and opened it?
I think probably since I was a teenager. I think for my senior project in high school, I opened a restaurant. I think I called it Chez Soi, which is like at home in French or something like that. Obviously, it evolved over time. But yeah, so I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years leading up to it, and then a couple serious years of planning.
What was your goal with the Grey Plume? What were you trying to say through that restaurant?
Honestly, I was just trying to do things right. I was, as you come up in restaurant kitchens, like you get to work under talented chefs and you get to learn a lot of how to do things the right way. But you also learn a lot of how to do things the wrong way. Whether that's through like the restaurant culture, whether that's through leadership style. There's a number of things you can do right and wrong. And I felt like I had seen enough that I felt like I just really wanted to do things right. Like I didn't want to necessarily just source like our main menu items locally, like the chicken and the beef and the pork and the duck, but then, source vegetables and things from another country or something like that and use a broadline distributor. I mean, I wanted to like check every little box we could, all the way down to, using sustainable bamboo pens with soy-based ink that the servers like took their orders with.
Why? That you made things so much harder on yourself with things like that.
Yeah.
Why did you do it? Why were you so passionate about that?
It just felt like the right thing to do. I'd say it was more of a calling than anything.
I think that's it right there. What you just said.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast interview recently, and the interviewee was a food critic, and she said, when I go to a place, I'm not trying to judge a restaurant based off how good the food is or the atmosphere or anything like that. She's like, I want to understand what the chef is trying to say through this restaurant and then figure out, is he or she achieving that? So I think that was kind of your North Star, is just I want to do things right.
For sure.
But that is really difficult because, I mean, especially in Nebraska, like this is a part of the country that has long seasons that are very cold.
Oh my gosh! Tell me about it.
Where you can't source carrots, you can't source tomatoes, you can't source a lot of ingredients that you would like to have on your menu all the time.
Yeah. What
made sourcing locally like this is something that we're not going to bend on? This is the pillar of what we're doing here.
Yeah, gosh, the guys or the kitchen team used to ask me that all the time. Like, can we please just order in some like mangoes or pineapple or something and switch it up? And we never did. I would say the early years were the hardest. So you've got to think like it's 2025. We opened in 2020. So 15 years ago, local food sourcing back then, like, it was not a thing.
A lot of farms have popped up since then. Your options were much smaller at that time.
For sure. Yep. A lot of like new generation farmers. There's some great co-ops out there now. So like these collectives where you can do local food sourcing. But like back in the day, there was not. I was super fortunate that actually Paul Kulik had opened the Boiler Room a year before I had opened the Plume, and was like a fantastic resource in a lot of those things. Like we would compare notes and compare farmers, and I would spend so much time like on the phone scouring the web, like trying to find producers and ranchers, and then we would just share contacts. I mean, it was a pretty cool thing. And eventually over time, like it got easier. But the first few years we served a lot of beets in the winter, a lot of turnips, a lot of rutabagas. But then we eventually started like canning in the summer months to like carry us through the winter months. We were like an FDA certified establishment so that we could like can our own pickles and, all those things. And, over time we started doing like thousands and thousands of jars every year just to get us through the winter.
I don't know if this is going to be I might be totally barking up the wrong tree with this question, but
Sure.
I was going to ask, is there a little bit of fun in that? When you talk about serving beets and rutabaga, these are not things that the average home cook is using. And especially back in, like, I feel like those ingredients have become more popular now, but back in 2010, nobody was using those.
Sure.
I still remember the first time I went to a restaurant, and I think it was a tasting menu because I never would have ordered this on my own. But there was a tasting menu that had beets on it, and I was just like, okay, whatever, I'll get through that part of it. They're fantastic. And I'm at the point now where if I see beets on a dish, I'm more likely to order it because when beets are prepared right, they're a wonderful part of a dish. I mean, they can be the star of the dish if you want them to. Was there some fun in like introducing people to that? Like the fact that you could unlock that for someone who would never eat beets, and they come into your restaurant and you see them eat a beet dish, or you hear that they really enjoy the dish from the server or something like that. Does that give you some of like the momentum or just the confidence when the guys are asking you about mangoes and papayas and stuff, and you're like, no, we can do this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was like the beauty of it, right? It's like you take a beet and then you learn how to prepare it like 30 different ways. And it's like, what are we going to do? Are we going to roast it? Are you going to puree it? Are we making a beet mousse? I remember at one point, David Brandenburg is his name. He was our pastry chef at the time, who's now, he's a James Beard Award winner after he left, and he's based in Colorado. But we had a dessert on the menu that was like a beet mousse, and then we had local peanuts, and he would make like a local peanut butter. It was like a beet mousse, a peanut butter, and horseradish, and he would dip it in white chocolate, and then it essentially would go in like a mason jar. And it sounds so weird, but it was delicious. Yeah. So you just, it's kind of the fun of it, I guess.
So I found another quote from you. This is when the Plume was still open, but you were talking about your process and how you would source things. And you said, we call the farmers and growers, say, what do you have this week? Then we write our menu. We place our order. The food will come. Sometimes it will be different than what we ordered, and then we write the menu again. So what is the balance between having that creative freedom and being able to constantly reinvent, and you're always kind of scratching that creative itch, versus having the pressure of constantly having to come up with something new again and again? Not just the pressure from diners who are always expecting something spectacular from the Grey Plume, but also the pressure of you don't know what the producer is going to bring in sometimes. You don't know if there's a hailstorm that all of a sudden, we don't get zucchinis for the next 2 weeks. Like, what's the creative freedom and the pressure? What was that balance like for you?
Yeah, so I would say maybe it's just because that's what my experience is in and how we did it, but I would prefer to menu write like that 10 times out of 10, because I think that it creates this framework for you, right? Where it's like, okay, you have these set ingredients, like let's see how creative we can be in technique and procedure and all the things to create something, impactful, meaningful, and delicious. Whereas if I was just looking at a pantry and I had like access to absolute anything under the sun, for me that would be overwhelming. So it's like, I don't know. I guess I would prefer to, write a menu that way.
We talked about how farm to table sustainability, that was your North Star.
Sure.
The Green Restaurant Association at one point named the Grey Plume the most sustainable restaurant in the country. What do you remember about hearing that news, and what did that mean to you?
Yeah, I still remember when we got the phone call. So my business partner and I, Chef Michael Howe, we were sitting at the bar in the Grey Plume. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days before opening, and we had just finished doing some staff training. Everyone had went home for the day, and my phone rang. It was the Green Restaurant Association. They're like, "Hey, congratulations! We just finished your certification report, and you are the greenest restaurant in the country." And we went, "What? What did we do?" Oh my goodness! Because that was never the intent. It was just, honestly, it was starting with really big picture stuff from building materials, and back then FSC. Certified sourced wood was not a really common thing. Now it's a very common thing. But we started with big picture things, and then we just kept getting more granular and more granular and more granular, not with any intention of being the greenest anything. It just happened.
So I want to talk about another award recognition you received, and that's James Beard. First James Beard nomination comes in 2011. Which is 1 year after you opened the Grey Plume. And for those who don't know, the Beards are they're the Emmys, the Grammys, whatever, the highest awards in the food world. This is kind of what the James Beards are. And we've had a number of Omaha chefs and restaurants be nominated since, but you were one of the first in the city. And your first nomination was for Rising Star Chef. So take me back to that moment. How did you find out, and what was that feeling like?
Ooh, man. That's a blur, to be honest. With the GRA, it was never the goal to be James Beard recognized or anything like that. We were just really just trying to put ourselves out there. And I will say that I really feel like there was this combination. It was the coupling of the green restaurant initiatives and the style of restaurant that really kind of turned some heads and put us on the map, right? Because here we are in what they would say middle America, flyover country. I was 24 years old when we opened. It really kind of helped put us on the map and turn some heads. I don't remember the exact moment. I think maybe I was driving to work, and I started getting a bunch of text messages. And it was "Congratulations, chef, congratulations, oh my gosh, congratulations." I'm like, "Congratulations for what?" What are you talking about? Yeah, it was wild. It was a cool feeling.
What was your response to that? Because I think there's kind of two ways someone could go. Someone could get that and be like, "Holy crap, I'm a chef in the middle of America," like you said, flyover country, and I just got nominated for a Beard Award. I've made it. And then there's the other personality that says, "Okay, great. Now we just have to be better."
Exactly.
I'm assuming you're in the latter category.
Yeah,
okay.
It was this feeling of validation, right? Because we had an amazing crew, a super incredibly dedicated group of people that were not just in the kitchen, but just working in the restaurant as a whole. And I think it was validation for not just myself, but for all of us that all that effort was not in vain, right? That it feels good to get recognized sometimes, but then it was okay, double down. The real work begins. Let's make sure that, the work that we're doing is, I guess, impactful enough that it deserves the award.
Well, clearly the Beards thought that it was impactful enough to deserve the award, because you got nominated again in 2012 as Rising Star Chef, and then 2013, 14, and 15 for Best Chef in America. To keep racking up nominations but never advance further than nominations, to be a semifinalist but not to be a finalist or a winner.
Sure.
What's your mindset when that keeps happening? It sounds crazy to be frustrated by a Beard nomination, but does it get frustrating at some point?
No, I don't think so. I always tell the joke when people ask, what was that like for you? I'm like, forever bridesmaid, never the bride. And it's okay. I was honored just to be included in such talented circle of chefs, you know.
So you get a nomination 5 years in a row, 2011 to 2015, and then you operate the Plume for another 5 or 6 years until 2020, and nothing. Does that shake your confidence as a chef? Like, where was your head at that just like, it almost, not an expectation, but it would kind of feel like an expectation year after year after year, and then all of a sudden just radio silence from the beards. Are you wondering, like, what are we doing wrong? Or
yeah, I think naturally you have to ask yourself, like, what are we doing wrong? You know, are we not evolving enough? Are we too comfortable? Have we, like, followed this format and we're just, like, riding the wave at this point? But, like, if you look back, yes, so, like, the first 5 years we were open, there wasn't, I'm not trying to, like, minimize the recognition, but, like, there wasn't as much competition. You know, the longer we were open, the more restaurants that were open in, you know, the Minneapolis area, the St. Paul area. There were other chefs like myself that had, like, worked under, like, incredibly talented people and made their way back home and decided to open a restaurant, you know, in their hometown. So no, like, I wouldn't say it was, like, disappointing. I'd say it was an honor in the first place. But yeah, it makes you wonder, I guess.
How did you see Omahans' attitudes toward the Grey Plume change over its lifetime? Because, like you mentioned, you know, when you were working at V. Mertz, there weren't tasting menus in Omaha. There weren't. Now, farm to table is a buzzword that just about every restaurant throws out and tries to do. Very few were doing it in 2010, 2011. Nobody was doing the sustainability stuff that you were. So I'm sure, you know, there's a little bit of shock value for Omaha when you first opened, just like, what the heck is this place? How did you see that change over time?
Yeah, it was actually a pretty cool transformation, so to speak. Is it's like when we first opened, I felt like not like we got pushback from guests, but we got a lot of questions, right? Like naturally, like, you know, we were pretty cognizant about, like, not putting French terminology and things like that on our menu, even if it was like a French-inspired dish or a French technique, because we wanted it, like, in the best way possible to be approachable, right? Like, it's like fine dining without, you know, any pretentiousness. And I think that really helped. You know, our servers were in white button-down shirts and dark blue jeans, and, you know, so we, like, tried to make it comfortable. But interestingly enough, like, you know, over time when someone would come in, you know, they might kind of be like, what is that or why? But over time, and the more, like, they came back, if they were, like, celebrating a birthday or anniversary, or we were their once-a-year place, or they'd come sit at the bar and have happy hour with us, or whatever it was, over time you, like, develop this relationship of trust where they might have once said, that's really weird. They're just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of weird, and we know it's going to taste good, so we're not going to ask questions, and we'll just order it anyway.
What are you most proud of when you look back at the Grey Plume and what you accomplished there?
I think we did a lot of things right, to be honest. You know, I think that we put a considerable amount of money back into, like, the local farming community, the local farming economy, so to speak, over the years, which I think was super cool. We had some great partnerships with local artisans, you know, that we really rallied behind, you know, like handmade clay platters, wood boards that we served our bread on, like really kind of, you know, all of that. But as I look back and I look at, like, the number of people that came through the kitchen over the years, like it was a pretty considerable amount, right? Like there were some chefs that were pillars with us that stayed for a long time, and then there were some that were more transient that, you know, kind of came and went. But when you look at what a lot of them are doing now, they're, like, running their own place, or they're the executive chef for somebody else, or they're running a hotel, or they have just really kind of moved up in the, you know, echelon of the culinary world. And I would, like, attribute a lot of that to, like, the foundation we set at the restaurant, which is pretty cool.
So you come to the decision to close the restaurant, and I know, you know, you talked about earlier the positives of that, and that you got a little bit better work-life balance. You got to spend more time with family and with Heather. But I mean, your whole life to that point had been about being a restaurant chef. You know, you mentioned you've had this dream. You started thinking about the Plume in some respect in 2016.
Sure.
And you work at True, and you work at V-Mertz, you work at Spencer's, and then you run the Plume for 10 years. Like, your whole life has been building towards being a restaurant chef, and then all of a sudden, that's just gone. How did you mentally, like, reset your career?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, I think, you know, like at first there's this like sense of identity that you like associate with it, right? Like it's what you live, it's what you breathe, it's what you think about, it's what you talk about every day. Like it is your whole life. And so, you know, all of a sudden, whoop, rip goes the Band-Aid. Yeah, for sure there's this like sense of new identity that you have to like cultivate in and of yourself. I think at like the same time, you know, as I was like transitioning with the like restaurant closing, I was really in this also like self-discovery phase of wellness, right? Like wellness in lifestyle, wellness in exercise, wellness in the food that you eat, like understanding like the connection, you know, food is medicine. Not that I didn't like believe that in the past, but I had not paid as much attention to it as I had, I think, in the time that the restaurant like had temporarily closed, right? And I was just at home. It was like this whole, you know, new phase of life. And I just loved being with my kids. That was like, that to me is like the absolute most important thing, like in the entire world. I love being there when they wake up in the morning. I love being there when they go to bed at night. I love doing bedtime. I love feeding them dinner. You can't trade that for anything, and you can't get that time back either.
I think that that's something that most people don't realize about the life of a chef. They hear, oh, the hours are crazy, and oh, working 70 hours a week, yeah, getting home late, and that kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But now that you've gotten the chance to, and you kind of just answered this, but you've gotten the chance to see both sides of it, can you just shed a little bit of a light more on what it is like to be, whether it's a chef, a cook, whatever, and just the things that you sacrifice, the family and friend experiences that you said no to for 20-some years that you get to say yes to now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is total truth in that. And in order to, you know, be everything from like a dishwasher and line cook to a sous chef to executive chef, like whatever the position is, and at least, I mean, I understand everybody, there's the hierarchy and everybody has their time and place, get in where you fit in, so to speak. One position isn't more important than the other because it takes them all to make it work, but you have to be so passionate about what you do, right? Like you have to really love it in order to give up the things that you give up, because you do, you know, like when does everyone go out to eat? Nights, weekends, holidays? Okay, well, that's when you work. It's just part of the nature of the business. And I think as a young person, I didn't mind it. Like I know as a young guy, I didn't mind it at all. Like in college, like I didn't live in the dorms. I had my own apartment. I went to school. I went to work. I went to school. I went to work. Rinse and repeat, you know, 6-7 days a week. But as you get older and you evolve, I just think needs and wants change. And that's natural.
Now, you don't strike me as a very ego-driven guy, and maybe I'm totally wrong and you have a raging ego inside, but you seem pretty low-key. But still, like, you know, you for 12, I mean, more than just the time that you owned the restaurant, you've been receiving accolades. You were, you know, sous chef, chef de partie at incredibly young ages. Then you open this restaurant and you get James Beard Awards, and you just mentioned the people that you had the chance to cultivate. And I know that this isn't your primary focus, but I'm sure like when you see some of the people who worked under you now being executive chefs or owning their own places or whatever it is at other restaurants, there's a little pride in that. You're just like,
sure,
hey, that I helped raise that person, and now all that is gone, and your significance your identity isn't the restaurant. Your significance isn't the restaurant. It's your family. And that's awesome. But what did it take for you to kind of shift that mindset and say, no, my identity is no longer the Grey Plume. My identity is no longer chef. Mm-hmm. My identity is dad. Mm-hmm. My identity is partner. Like, I can't imagine that switch just flips overnight, does it?
For sure. Yeah, I think maybe not for everybody. And then, it's not that you like are wishy-washy about it, but I think it's really easy for that to flip overnight when you're like ready to make the change, if that makes sense. There were a number of years. So I have 4 kids. I have a 16-year-old son, a 12-year-old daughter, and that was with my ex-wife in the first part of my life. And then Heather and I have 2 little boys that are 4 and 5. And with my older 2 kids, it was always about quality of time, not quantity, because I was just gone a lot. I'd miss the soccer games on the weekends, and I'd miss the bedtime and all the stuff. But when I was there, I was, very active, very present. I would, do the best I can to not be on my phone, and you know what I mean, all the things when running a business. And with the little boys that we have now, I really felt like it was like a new opportunity, right? It was like this whole chance, this redo again, that it wasn't just about quality, it was about quality and quantity, that I wanted to spend as much possible time as I could, but I also wanted it to be great time. So it was a pretty easy decision.
Tell me a little bit more about this eye-opening you've had that food is medicine, because I feel like we're in a stage in America where people are starting to pay a lot more attention to what they're putting into their body. They're actually looking on the back of the package at the store and being like, I can't pronounce 70% of the ingredients on this list. The Mediterranean diet is a huge fad right now. It's exploding. When you talk about food as wellness and food as medicine,
sure, what
does that look like in your life?
Yeah, well, I think that's makes up a really good portion of our life, to be honest. I believe like food is fuel and food is medicine. Like as a young cook, right? Like it was about technique. It was about like how to put good flavors, together in a combination with technique and procedure to put this awesome, elaborate thing on a plate. And I think as I've evolved, because I still am a chef, I am still, doing things in the culinary world. My style has just like become more and more simple, where I'm like trying to allow the ingredients to kind of speak for themselves. Like I stay out of the way of all the hard work that the farmer rancher did before me, and I just kind of get in and highlight that. But I think, more so now it's about like combining certain ingredients because they like work well in the body and they don't cause inflammation, and you don't get inflammation responses and like all of these things. And so it's like as I get older, I can like tell immediately after I eat something like how I'm going to feel for the next couple hours, right? Like, as a younger person, like the pizza and the like all of the things, they like don't really affect you. But as you get older, they seem to.
Getting old sucks.
No, it's good.
It really does. There are good and bad aspects to it. On the eating side of it, I mean, I remember in high school, I would go and get like an entire Little Caesars pizza for lunch and eat the entire thing.
Oh, yeah.
And like that was just fine. Like that was just a normal lunch. Now if I do that, I'm out of commission for like 4 hours and my stomach is going to be barking at me for 2 days.
You bet.
But I think that it is important to become just more aware of what we're putting in our bodies, because that's ultimately, what creates what we are. As we wind down here, you seem very content and very happy with where you are in life, running Noble Hospitality, being a dad, being a partner, getting a chance to do pop-ups. When you look at the future of Clayton Chapman's career, do you see this sustaining for a long period? Are you looking for new opportunities? What does the future look like for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think naturally we're always looking and open to new opportunities, whatever, the universe seems to bring. But yeah, I am very happy with what I'm doing and content, and where things are. And I do love to like do these pop-ups, like we had mentioned, the Bohemian Gardens. We have, we're trying to, I guess, pick, one day every month to kind of offer what they're calling the Boho Supper Club that they had originally started last year, and we're kind of resurrecting, one Thursday night a month, which I'm super excited about. It like gives you the opportunity to wet your whistle with without having to get back into it entirely. So, it's kind of the blend of things, and it just feels really good.
Would you ever open another restaurant?
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, like I am in the process of working with a group of individuals, on a project that will open maybe sometime later this year. But
what?
Those details cannot yet be shared.
This is breaking news, though. Well, maybe it's not breaking news. Maybe I'm living under a rock, but this is news to me.
But it's not like in the capacity that I once did. It was like when I was part of like Untamed Kitchen, which I absolutely loved, which was that health and wellness brand, and I really feel like it checked so many boxes for the community. This will kind of be not like in that restaurant style, but my presence will be kind of in a similar way where, writing the menu, kind of setting the curriculum, getting the team going, giving everybody the tools to be successful. But hopefully, fingers crossed, not being the chef behind the stove every night.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to put your feet to the fire. I'm not going to press you for any more details, but as soon as you feel comfortable sharing more, you let me know, because
absolutely
anything that you're touching, I want to eat there, because that was a really weird way to say that sentence, but I guarantee the food is going to be fantastic. I think that's a perfect note to end on, Clayton.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for giving me the time and coming on the podcast today. I'm sorry that it took 5.5 years to finally make this happen, but
it's okay.
The pleasure it was worth the wait.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. You've had some real legends on the show, so it was an honor. Thank you so much for your time.
And Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.